Greetings, YouTube. I'm currently looking at a game called Pythos, Pythos, and it's very reminiscent of 5th edition, except they have a D10 instead of a D20. They're very reminiscent. I mean, like, they have disfavor and favor instead of advantage and disadvantage, for example. So the rules have a very similar feel, though it is the most granular fatigue system I've ever seen with 5 fatigue tiers. I don't think I've ever seen a game that goes into that much detail when it comes to fatigue. Um, and one of the things they introduced, though, is something I thought was a little odd. Now, in your standard D20 game, whether it was 3.5 or Pathfinder First Edition, I believe it's also the same for Second Edition as well as Fifth Edition D&D. Your standard unit for a character is a 5-foot square. So your character is assumed to be standing in a 5-foot square. I guess technically you could use a 5-foot hex as well if you wanted to. I know there are folks out there that prefer hex grids. Whatever floats your boat, folks. There are things to be said for it. There are things to be said against it. And for that, it's kind of assumed that you're in the middle of the 5-foot square. So you're standing in one 5-foot square middle, and the guy next to you is standing in, and your opponent who's in front of you is standing in front of it. So you are essentially from the core of your being to the core of their being, there is a 5-foot space. So attacking someone who is adjacent to you, 5 feet away, is a relatively simple task, even if it's involving hand-to-hand combat or a touch spell, because all you have to do is take one step forward and you reach, bingo, you hit him. Okay, well, if you got a good roll, you hit him. That's been standard for a very long time. Think that was even, I think that might have been something we used even back in the old second edition rules, but I could be wrong in that one. I am old. I'm 60. But Pythos is something different. For Pythos, reach is 10 feet. And that stopped me dead in my tracks. You're telling me that 10 feet is considered reach for you. Okay, now 10 feet from me right now is probably my printer. Okay? Now in a 6-second round, that would be a third of my movement. And yet, that is not considered your movement. That is just your reach range. Whereas under more common D20 rules, you'd reach 5 feet, which means from where I am here, which means it would be approximately almost at my doorway. I again stand up, take one step forward, 2 feet, one step forward, bingo, touch. That is a touch range. Okay? 5 feet makes sense. 10 is absurd. You just negated the usefulness of two-handed swords and lots of pole arms. Gone. Why would you do this? Why would you have those kind of weapons if you could have faster weapons, longsword, battle axe, and a shield, if that's how close you have to be? I can hit someone 10 feet away with a longsword or a broadsword or a khopesh or whatever. Why would I want to have a greatsword, which is taking 2 hands, no defense bonus, and is heavier and more expensive? And later in the game, there is a combat maneuver you can acquire, because the system doesn't say feats. They have talents, and they have skills, and they have uh, uh, maneuvers. It's a little bit more muddled than D20 system, but they're essentially playing the same role as feats do. So there is a combat feat you can pick up, which gives you a greater reach with your two-handed weapon. So if you have a two-handed sword or two-handed axe or a Tetsubo, you could then strike further. How far? It gives you a range of 15 feet. You just created a situation where a guy with a sword that's got a 3-foot blade, maybe 3.5 feet, can hit someone the same distance as a real-world pike. I don't care how many feet you have. You can't do that. I mean, if this is some kind of wushu magic stuff, I might buy it. You're chucking your sword, hitting them, and coming back to you. All right. But actual mundane, non-magical combat? No. That's not reach. That's pike range. I am mystified why they would do this. I'm reading it and I'm like, have you never seen people fight? Have you never tried it yourself? Have you never looked at real world weapons? Because this is a one-handed weapon. And I could hit someone who's 5 feet away from me. No problem with this. Again, one step forward, thmack. And if I got a shield, I got some defense. But I can't hit someone 10 feet away within a 6-second round unless I use my movement as well, which makes me vulnerable because I may be passing other enemies or terrain or such, or walking into someone's polearm, because in the real world, polearms have a purpose. But in Pythos, apparently, they don't. Yeah, I thought this was just friggin' silly. I'm not done reading reading it. It's still got some merit to it, and I'm enjoying how they're doing it and seeing the way they've created a very modular, very pedantic way of presenting information. Everything is done in a very reasoned and logical manner for the most part. Really does run counter to me seeing this all this bull about there being a 10-foot reach. So let's talk about reach. How far do you think is a reasonable distance for reach? For me, it's 5 feet, okay, or 1.5 meters if you're doing science fiction. Okay, that's a very reasonable distance. But 10 feet or 3 meters? No, that is not reach. That's polearm range, which is where it should be, because polearms have a reason they exist, because they're really damn useful.